So as you guys know, on this channel, I really love the story of Call of Duty, and basically every single season and the end of every single season, we get an update to the story of Black Ops Cold War into Warzone. And this season was no exception. We've already went over the Season 4 story, but there was something else big that actually changed within Season 4. And in fact, it's actually been happening for a couple of months now, where certain characters' bios have been actually getting changed in-game and kind of giving us more information and background on the characters, and therefore more information on the story. Specifically, what we are going to be looking at today is Perseus. Perseus has a larger secret that a lot of you may not have realized, and you can see it based off of the bios of the various different Perseus agents in game. So today what we're going to be doing is going over all of those bios and coming to a conclusion at the end of the video as to what this means for an individual character that is actually in the campaign. And you'll see what I mean as we go through this, but first we have to hear from today's video sponsor. So today's video is sponsored by War Robots. Now, I know you guys like shooter games, you like multiplayer, maybe even just like explosions, and that is why this game is perfect for you. Essentially what War Robots is you become a pilot of essentially a giant robot, which you can have various different types of guns. For example, you can have machine guns, sonic weapons, rail guns, rockets, flamethrowers, and many other different types of weapons. And then you fight in a 6v6 battle against other people online to see who is really the best of the best. Now, one of my favorite parts about this is you can go on and you can upgrade your robot, upgrade its weapons, and become better and better at the game simply by upgrading your robot, or you can just simply become a better pilot. Now, a cool thing about this game is it's available for iOS, Android, and PC, so you can check it out on all of those right now. And to do so, click that link down in the description, and when you do so, you're actually able to get a starter pack, and with this, you get a robot, a weapon with a unique skin, and on top of that, 100 gold and 50,000 silver to get you started on your journey. So check it out now. It's a great game. I think you guys will really love it. So click that link down in the description, and thank you War Robots for sponsoring the video. So since the beginning of Black Ops Cold War and Warzone this year, we have had a new Perseus agent added to the game with every single season. In fact, every single season, the main Battle Pass character has been a new Perseus operative. And this season was no different. And with each of them, we get more and more information on why those characters were recruited and why Perseus wants these characters. And where we get most of this information is the bios in game. So as far as the bios in game here go, what we used to see was a lot of what you see with Naga here. You see his service affiliation to Perseus, and then his citizenship, as you can see, and then finally a paragraph going over how he got to where he is as of now. However, what you may not know is a lot of these little bios have actually changed quite substantially. For example, if we look at Stitch here, we have his entire service record, and then at the very end, we also have a peer assessment. And that peer assessment is actually going to be the most important part of most of these characters' stories, as you're going to see. But if we go and start off with his service record, we see in 1959, he graduates the Mandelev Institute of Chemical Technology, and basically in chemistry. In 1959, he joins the KGB Operations and Technology Directorate and assigned to Laboratory 12 R&D facility. 1965, assigned to manage production facilities at Rebirth Island, and he was reporting directly to Colonel Kravchenko. 1968, he is captured and interrogated by Russell Adler, during which he loses an eye, as we know, we've seen that in the cutscene, and he gave up nothing other than his name and his rank. For failing to repel the CIA operation, Kravchenko has him stripped of his rank and sent to the Petropavlovsk Gulag. This is the Gulag that we kind of know and seen all over the place, including in Warzone. And then in 1976, there was an attack on the Gulag by an unknown team of operatives. They leave many prisoners and guards dead, and in the aftermath, Stitch is missing. Now, the peer assessment, this is where it gets interesting. Initial contacts made in 1970 revealed a broken man, questioning his loyalties to state that had abandoned him. Driven by a burning hatred for Russell Adler, the CIA agent that had taken his eye and cost him everything, as well as his former commanding officer Kravchenko. He was open and receptive to our visions for a greater Russia. His singular drive will make him an excellent asset, and his first-hand knowledge of Project Nova will be invaluable in achieving our goals. Now, what you may realize when reading that peer assessment, it is very, very clearly written by Perseus. which means that any of the other Perseus operatives that we can look at will also have an assessment done by Perseus. So the next example we have of this is Wrait. As you can see, Naga's bio hasn't been updated yet, but Wraith's is very similar. In the year 1973, graduates Oslo in political science. 1974, enlists in the Wrait Norwegian Armed Forces and assigned to the Norwegian Joint Headquarters. In 1978, recruited to the Norwegian Intelligence Service, but as we can see by her peer assessment, described in her annual assessment, a true patriot, determined and utterly focused. Wrait is unique in our experience. Of those who have joined our cause, in other words, Perseus's cause, she is the only one to have actively sought out and offered her services. Her political background, along with her experiences in the NJHQ, made her understand that when the Cold War turns hot, Scandinavia's geography would make it a battlefront. While handling intercepts at NJHQ for the CIA in 1981, she learnt of us, did her own research, came to us and offered her loyalty. She's a true patriot, one who sees the lies of her leaders for what they are. She's an excellent asset. So the interesting thing about Wrait here is she is the only Perseus asset who actually reached out to Perseus herself, and based upon that does her own missions that she offers to do. She is willing to work for them because she now doesn't believe in the leaders of her country. The other thing I want you to pay attention to is that she's got ties directly into government and government services. This is something that you'll see throughout the various different Perseus assets, and something that Perseus is very clearly wanting in his associates. Now, the other character that came out that season, Knight, is interesting because he doesn't really have any sort of peer assessment. We just kind of have a timeline of what he has done all the way up until 1980. So he started out in the year 1955 enlisting in the Irish Army, then deployed to the Congo as a part of the UNOC, or the United Nations operation in the Congo, as a peacekeeping force. He was wounded during the siege of Jettaville, I don't know if I said that right, and held POW for a month. He was promoted to sergeant, and then later in 1963 demoted to a corporal following the violent disciplining of a subordinate. 1964 he was dishonorably discharged for starting a fight with a superior officer, and then in 1965 recruited to the MI6. Service records at this point are classified. Fragments of poor redacted CIA documents suggest Gray may have been involved in several extrajudicial killings of high-ranking members of the foreign intelligence agencies. In 1975, KGB debrief of MI6 operative captured during a failed assassination attempt against the Soviet leadership reveals that Gray was the officer responsible for their wet works training. In 1980, he was dismissed from MI6 service due to conduct unbecoming during SIS MI6 operations carried out in Afghanistan while supporting the Mujahideen operations against the occupying Soviet forces. Okay, so we don't learn too much as far as Knight goes. We know that in 1980, he was essentially kicked out of MI6, and at this time, just a year later, is when Perseus starts recruiting agents. Now, we don't know what Perseus thinks of Knight at this point, but we can see how his kind of violent behavior has led up to him being kind of recruited by Perseus. So then when we get to our new character, Jackal, for this season, there is no dates or anything like that, but there is a paragraph that I do want to read. It starts right here. Rumors surrounding his origins are few and far between. Those who know also know well enough to keep their mouths firmly closed. Judging by the types of weaponry now at his company's disposal, it appears that he has acquired some new, well-connected backers with very deep pockets. And obviously, as we know, he is working with Perseus, and those are the deep pockets that they're talking about. It's also important to know that Naga, the only other person who doesn't have their bio change, is a former warlord and a weapons and drug trafficker who could be supplying weapons to Jackal here. Now, the one other character that we have here that doesn't quite line up is Stone. Now, Stone is an interesting character, and we've talked about this in the past as to the idea of whether or not Stone is Bell from the campaign. I want to read through what the bio has to say about him, and then we can kind of come to our own conclusion. As you can see with his service affiliation, it does not say he's a part of Perseus. However, what we do learn is in 1966, he's enlisted 1 Yorkshire Regiment Infantry. In 1970, 4 years later, applies and qualifies for the SAS and assigned to the 22nd SAS Division. In 1973, transfers to the Special Projects Team, receiving additional trainer in close quarters combat, counterterrorism, and hostage rescue. 1974, classified. We'll get to that in a second. 1975, dishonorably discharged for classified. Stone reportedly working as a mercenary, training in an anti-Angolan separatist forces in Zeri. I'm probably saying that wrong. 1979, unconfirmed intelligence places Stone in Afghanistan, allegedly involved in training pro-Soviet militants. His peer assessment. Ex-SAS colleagues for Stone, speaking under conditions of anonymity, describe him as a solid soldier, prone to playing by his own rules. None of those interviewed were prepared to comment on the situation surrounding his discharge. His career as a mercenary makes him a likely recruitment candidate. However, his lack of attachment to or influence over a state security service limits his value in this regard. Recommend continuing surveillance and monitoring. Okay. This is hugely important because, as you can see by the peer assessment, once again, it is clearly written by Perseus. They are talking about recruiting Stone. Interesting. Let's go back to the campaign and see how this would tie into Bell. So I'm not going to go through the whole campaign, but at the end of the campaign, we see Adler shoot Bell. And with this, it kind of ends the relationship between Bell and the CIA. And in the bio for Stone, it says that they would like him to have more of an affiliation with some sort of government entity. And since Stone or Bell, if they are the same person, would then be affiliated with the CIA, it would make sense for Perseus to want to recruit Bell or Stone after that fact. Well, I hate to say it, but this also confirms that Stone is not Bell. And the reason why we know this is because at the very beginning of the campaign, when you recruit Bell, he's inside of a Jeep, he then gets shot, and at this time, he is already working for Perseus. Hence, during the entire campaign, the CIA is trying to get information about Perseus out of Bell. Which means, based off of Stone's bio, he was not recruited by Perseus at that point. So, Bell is not Stone, but there is another interesting piece of information on Stone that we do have. So if we go back to Stone's bio, at the very end, before we get into the peer assessment, it says in 1979, unconfirmed intelligence places Stone in Afghanistan, allegedly involved in training pro-Soviet militants. Now this is interesting because if we go back to Knight and go down to the bottom of his, in the year 1980, he was dismissed from MI6 service due to conduct unbecoming during an operation in Afghanistan while supporting the Mujahideen in operations against the Soviets. So almost at the exact same time, 1 year apart, Stone and Knight were on opposing forces within Afghanistan. Now, this could mean, if we go back to Stone's bio, that unconfirmed intelligence is actually from Knight, and Knight giving Perseus that information about Stone. It's also important to note that, like a lot of other Perseus associates, Stone was also dishonorably discharged, just like the other characters, making him kind of go against his government and be more likely to work for someone like Perseus. So whereas we see Stone not as of yet working for Perseus, it could be something we see coming in the coming seasons. And as we get more updated bios and more information, I will keep you guys updated on this. Not to mention, if we go over to NATO and look at a lot of the other characters' bios, for example, like Woods, we have a lot more information on these characters too. Like Woods has 2 redacted paragraphs that we actually know about. So if you'd like to see me dive into the good characters, hit that like button. Let me know down in the comments. If the video does well, I'll be more likely to do a video like that. So if it's something you're interested in, hit that like button. Let me know down in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel to stay up to date on all of this information. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace out.